you guys. You've been asking for it, so here it is. How to tile your artwork when you're doing larger engravings that are larger than your engraving bed. So we're going to go over some settings. You're going to see some engravings, how I set up some tables or jigs. I'm going to show you how to tile vector art. And I'm also going to show you how to tile bitmap art along with vector art and doing two files in one. Now I'm not going to show you how to paint today. For a full tutorial on how I paint my engravings, check out video 31. So here's a neat little trick that I like to use when I'm doing larger objects than my engraving bed. I like to put in a ruler and I butt it up against the legs. This way I can pull my material through for each section that I'm engraving and it stays nice and straight. And I'm just showing you some of my cord management there that I'm using for my SCULPFUN S30 Pro 10 watt. Okay, so those are just carabiners there, tags, that help to hold my cords up. And I will be using the 10 watt laser today. And this is just my DIY enclosure. It's not fancy, but it works. So this is another way that I set up jigs. If I have to raise my machine and I have a ruler across, I use a handy dandy glue gun to make sure all the bases are secure. Another way that I've made a jig, when your material is so large that you cannot move it, like this, 300 to 600 pound cookie, I actually used a bed frame for this sucker. So using this system, I was actually able to slide my laser along the bed frame, using that as a jig, because that cookie was way too heavy to keep moving that. And you'll see I had some boards holding up my enclosure there, because I had to do this in my kitchen. This round was far too heavy to try to take up into my laser engraving room, and I didn't trust it on a table. So yeah, it's in the middle of my kitchen floor. So I'm not going to get into tiling how I tiled circles. That is a whole other video, and it's coming, I promise. Now this is not my artwork, and it's not sanded, because the individual that I did this for is going to sand it and actually fill any of those areas with epoxy. But coming up, I will show you how you can avoid certain areas with your engraving. And so this was 2 panels, and I think it would be very difficult for you to see where I butted up those 2 tiles together. Are you an escape artist, Kai? Get back. I know, you're cute as a button, but you gotta get back. So let's get into it. We're going to start out with how to tile vector art. So there are some differences, and I'm just going to pop on view the wireframe. So to the left, that's a bitmap image, or to the right is a vector art. So you'll see it's all in line art. Now I've designed a 8-inch by 72-inch growth chart here, and just by bringing in graphics and putting in my text and measurements, and I've just put it on different layers. So right now I'm just going to pull some guidelines in, because the first thing we need to do is get rid of that turtle overhang, because we need to make this design to scale. So this feature it comes with most programs, also comes with CorelDRAW, so it's all kind of basic what I'm showing you here. I just drew a rectangle. I'm going to put that to no fills and a hairline outline just so you can see what I'm doing here. I'm then going to select the rectangle and the turtle. Try that again, the rectangle and the turtle. Going down to my weld feature, I am using the punch out. And look at that, I have just cropped that whole vector art in 2 seconds, so it's going to be flush with my material. So you'll see now I do have some white bounding boxes that I put along my ticks there. so that they would stand out from the graphic. I could do another box. I'm going to select that white outline, and I'm going to punch that out. And now it is flush with my material side. So you'll see what I mean. This way the ticks will stand out from the graphic. Now I'm just going to make my material size of my growth chart white, and I'm going to send it to the back. And I'm going to remove the pen. And I would do all the graphics and crop them, but we're just going to go ahead and I'm going to show you how I can crop a bitmap in this program as well. So I'm going to grab a guideline. I'm going to draw another box here. Just going to make that a little bit bigger so I make sure that I'm cropping out the whole image. So once I've got my box drawn, I will select that. I will select the image and I will punch that out. So that I would export as part 1 if I was doing this very large. And then I'm just hitting Control Z. Make sure I got the image back. I'll take that box and then drag it up there to be able to crop this second part. But that way it's cropped perfectly where I had the guideline. And then I would export that as my second part. But again, you're likely not to have a program that can do this. CorelDRAW definitely cannot do the punch out. Lightburn cannot do the punch out with bitmap images. Okay, so I'm going to take my whole stick now that it is finally all cropped, and I'm going to rotate that. I'm going to view the wireframe here, or turn the wireframe off so you can see the fills. Then I've gone back to wireframe, and I'm going to grab some guidelines because I've grouped all these images together. I'm then going to pull it down and make sure it's snapped to the guidelines. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to draw a box which is just a little bit less than what your laser engraving bed is capable of engraving. Because remember, if you're putting rulers in there, you have to allot for that little bit of extra room that you're going to use the offset X or possibly Y to move your laser engraver to its starting point. So for instance, I know with my OLM3 and my LM2 Pro, I at least have 14 3/4 with the 2. And the OLM3, I think I have 15 3/4. The SCULPFUN, I have just under 14 3/4 inches, I believe. So there, I've moved the box to butt up against the guideline. And then I pulled a guideline to where I want to make my first tile. And what I'm trying to do is avoid any artwork, like too much artwork that might be too busy. I'm avoiding that. And then I will just make another guideline and pull my template box over. Okay, I might just avoid this shell as well. So they might not all be the same size for tiling. I'm just making it to avoid some of the graphics. And some of them might help to line up that aren't a little too busy. So I will pull another guideline. And I might put that just before the turtle. And there we go. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 panels. And it's totally up to you and your graphics that you're doing how many panels you want. So I'm just going to turn off the wireframe. So the original box that I used, I'm just going to drag that down to my first guideline. And I select my graphic and I use the punch out feature. So there you go. I have just made my first tile. So I would export that file. Okay, you normally create a folder so I can put them all in together. So we're just going to put in growth chart. And I'm going to name that part 1. So I have selected objects, transparent, and I have transparent selected so that there's no colors and Lasergrbl will see the white bounding box. I'm doing that at 300 dpi, so that is to scale. And now I need to make the rest of my tiles, so go edit, undo. I'm going to duplicate this box because now I'm going to cover up the first section, and I'm going to slide this one to my next guideline. There, so that's snapped to the next guideline. So I'll select that box, and my artwork. I'll punch that out. I'll select this box over here, select my artwork, and punch that out. So I've just created my second section. So I'm going to export that and name that as part 2. So again, selected objects, transparent, 300 dpi, and OK. Now don't panic if you do not have the choice of making your background transparent. Okay, I will show you in another program that's solid fill, or if you do not have the choice to make it transparent or solid, it will work absolutely fine. That's why we made a bounding box the same size as our material and put it to white. So you would just continue making your box using your guidelines and making each section and exporting each section. But I am going to show you another way how to crop this in a totally free program. So I've just taken my artwork back to original format and I'm exporting it as a PNG, and we're just going to call it simply 72. So I've got selected objects, transparent. We're going to change that to 300 dpi, and I'm going to say OK. Now it will warn me and tell me this file is super large, but I'm just going to ignore it, because I'm going to show you how you can tile in Gimp, and it is absolutely free. So of course my tool options, I have it floating, so I'm just going to put it to the left hand side. Now possibly to find your tool options you might have to click through your toolbox there, okay? I just keep mine on brushes. So we're going to open our file. Okay, so I'm selecting 72, the one that we just did, and I'm going to open that. Now I already know SignMate or SignMaster warned me on that, so I'm just going to double check its size because it said it was a huge file. So there we go. It didn't export completely to 300 dpi. So I'm going to scale that up, and I'm going to ignore that warning because we're not actually saving that whole file altogether. You're going to see what we're going to do here. So our sliders, top and bottom there, and you'll see that I have my rulers. If you don't see your rulers, go to View and click on Show Rulers. There we go. We've got our rulers. Now if you go to the bottom of the screen, I'm going to change my ruler values to inches because I'm old school, but you could do that millimeters as well. So with the magnifying tool, I'm going to zoom in. And I've just using the slider tools, I've gone up to the top, so you'll see we are 0 and 0. So just by going to the rulers there, you can slide down a guideline, and I am just going to use 14-inch guidelines. So the next guideline that I'm going to go down is 28 inches. And the next guideline, well, that's 28 inches plus another 14 inches. So you get the idea. We're going to make guidelines at every 14-inch increment. Now this part is totally up to you. You could bring in your image upside down if you wanted to make sure that your number 1 on the growth chart is just all in one section. Or we can just flip this whole growth chart around by using under Image Transform, rotate it 180 degrees. And then you can just engrave it upside down if you'd like. It's totally up to you. So having all our guidelines in place, we will now go Image, and we're going to go down Slice using Guides. Watch this trick. There's part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All our partitions automatically slice to where our guidelines are, and it's created new files. There we go. There's all our parts. So we'll take our first portion and we're going to export it. So up to File, Export As, and using Export As will let us export it as a PNG. So we're going to make a new folder so that we can put all these parts in together. And you'll see Gimp has already renamed the file portion here of 72-0 part 0. So we're just going to save that name and we're going to click Export. Now we don't have to worry about interlacing or the save background color, so you'll see what I have selected and what I don't have selected. Now I don't need to use 16-bit gray because it's not a photo that I want to keep high resolution to. So it'll be totally fine at 8-bit gray. We don't need to do it at RGB because that's color. So I'm just showing you there. 16-bit I like to do for very detailed images. And then I'm just going to do that for each and every piece. So you'll see that Gimp relabeled it to 72-0 part 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm just going to export each and every folder there. All right, time to get into Lasergrbl. So we're going to open up Lasergrbl, make it nice and big. I'm going to go to File, Open, and I'm just going to get into my parts folder there. Okay, so the teeny tiny one there, 72-05, would be technically the first file that I would engrave. But we're going to pretend that 72-04 is my first file that I'm going to engrave. So just use your imagination along with me. Okay, let's make it nice and big so everybody can see it. So I am going to use the smooth feature for line-to-line tracing. I'm also going to put that on black and white. Now you'll see here it's in about 100% is super dark. So I'm just going to use that slider until what I think is best, and I stop on 75. My direction I'm going to engrave is horizontal, and depending how deep you want this, I am going to do 7 lines, and this is going to be on laminated pine. And I'm just going to actually show a video of when I was engraving this particular growth chart. I'm going to open one of the sections that I just had to divide it into 3 because of my extensions. So I did actually use 8 lines because I wanted this deep enough for me to paint. Okay, you didn't have to touch any of the settings down there, but I use the engraving speed of 1700 millimeters per minute with my 10-watt laser, dynamic power, So 5% minimum, 95% maximum. Now make sure you auto size each and every time. And make note of your width size, because your width should be staying the same while the height may be different. Now, because I am using a ruler as a guide, that is why in the X offset I am putting 14.3 millimeters, so that will move over to the right hand side of the laser engraving bed automatically and be starting on my material when I go to engrave. So you'll see that my artwork is moved over 14.3, and really all I need to do is home this and frame it to make sure that it's within my material. Now between each engraving I will use a ruler and a mechanical pencil so I can get the cleanest edge to draw an exact line lining up my engraving so I can line up my next panel, so that when you open up your next panel and you go to frame, this line will line up exactly with that line. And because we've used our ruler to keep it absolutely straight, we can just press home and press play, and you can start engraving and lining up your panels perfectly. Now you may remember this video when I was in the middle of my engraving until this. Power outages because of that gosh darn white stuff. So I'm going to show you how I crop that one panel in order to continue. So I'm going to open up the panel which the power cut out on me. We're going to import that into my program, and again you can do this in Gimp. Now I took a measurement from the ruler line that I had drawn on my board, and I knew that it cut off approximately 249 millimeters up. So I'm going to take a guideline here and make sure it's to the edge of my board, so I'm going to zoom in as much as I can. There we go. I'm happy with my guideline there. I'm going to zoom out, and then I'm going to draw a rectangle. Well, I'm first going to take my measurements to millimeters there, so I'm drawing a rectangle in millimeters. Okay, so I'm just going to draw the rectangle there, and then I'm going to make that rectangle 249 millimeters. So it's the exact measurement of how far I engraved before I lost power. And I make sure that that is snapped to that guideline exactly. Now I knew I was about 4 or 5 millimeters. I wrote that down on the side of the screen, or typed it in, I should say, into the T. So that's why I'm just going to double check the T here. I brought the guideline to the top of the 249 millimeters. And I'm just going to double check here with the T. I'm going to make a rectangle and make sure I'm within that distance as well before I crop this bad boy. And I can see that I am just under the 3 millimeters. Okay, 4 millimeters, the 3.834. So I know that I'm definitely close enough there that that is a good spot to crop. So I will expand my rectangle, and then I will use the punch out feature like I did earlier, and that will give me my part 3 that I'll need to reopen so I can engrave the remaining part that I need. Okay, so my final part I will export at 300 dpi. And we'll get into Lasergrbl again and make that nice and big. So I'm going to open that final part. Okay, I'm not going to change any of my settings that I used previously, which was 8 lines for this one. But for in the next screen, we're going to click on that. So I just want to draw your attention to the offsets. So I used 14.3 millimeters because of the ruler, but I had already had it to go up 241.5 millimeters. So I'm just going to auto size this new size of panel because I've cropped it. But I'm now going to add the 249 millimeters that I took off of that to the 241.5 millimeters, so that will start engraving exactly where I had the power outage. Because of course the machine turned off, so I didn't turn the machine off or move any of the material. So of course, double check your measurement. I'm just showing you right there. Double check your measurement of what you're cutting off. And if you did have an offset put in, make sure you add that in there as well. So there we go. 490.5 will start it exactly where it cut off when the power went out. Okay, so as soon as it files up, or opens up the files, I should say, I will home the machine. I will frame it to ensure that it's going to start right on that line, and then I will home it again and press play. And that's how I was able to save this large engraving. So just keep swimming. Don't give up. Where there's a will, there's a way. And of course, I like my engravings nice and deep because I like to paint them. So this was just painted with acrylic water-based craft paint, and then I clear coated it with the exterior diamond varathane. Okay, polyacrylic or anything will smear acrylic paint. It reactivates it. So use a good clear coat. Okay, now this growth chart was actually using bitmap images, so that I was using dithering and line-to-line art, and of course painted that as well. And I'm going to show you how to do that in Lasergrbl. So you'll see here I took my one growth chart, I duplicated that, I popped it over there. I am duplicating that once again because one part I want just with the vector art, and the other part I'm going to keep with my bitmap images that I used to create this. So I'm just going to snap them both down to the guideline so that they are perfectly lined up. And you'll see, if I go on wireframe, these are actually the 4 tiles that I created in order to engrave this particular growth chart. Okay, so let's slide that over there. We're going to view the wireframe. I'm going to probably just split these in half. And I was going to go underneath the tick, and then I decided, you know what, I'm gonna go underneath this tick. I was thinking that it would be so much easier to line up. I should have just been over top of the tick, because I'm pretty sure that's how I did it. Over top, and you would have been able to draw a straight line across. Okay, so anything that I have put on top of my bitmap image with writing wise, I usually put a white outline or a black outline. You've seen me do this before, just to make it stand out. So I just changed that. I'm going to keep that outline on the top. I got rid of the lettering. Any of the lettering and the tick marks and the numbers I want to do in line-to-line tracing, and any of the bitmaps I want to do in dithering. Okay, so I'm going to make sure one side has my dithering images and the other side is just my vector art. And once I've got that completed, I will again draw the rectangles, use my punch out tools in order to make the size of the panels that I can engrave. Now my panels can be bigger because I have the extension kits on my laser engravers. Okay, time to get into Lasergrbl. So Let's make that nice and big. So the first file that we're going to open is actually the Rosie test graphic that I made. So I actually made just a smaller section of this because when you open the bigger section, it's really hard to see all the detail that you want when you're going to put it on dithering. So I will use a cropped piece first so I can make sure I can dial in the brightness and the contrast exactly where I want it. And then I will open up the actual file, which is my dithering again. We're going to make that nice and big. So I'm going to change that to dithering. And you saw originally I liked 90, but then I had to keep an eye around the butterfly to make sure I was still getting enough detail. So I knew I could fine tune it in. Now I'm using Atkinson horizontal, and because I want to paint this in, I'm totally fine with doing 5 lines. And when I'm using the dithering and doing photographs, I like to have them on sharp. So again, I'm going to leave that on at 1700 speed, my 95% my maximum, and again I'm using my ruler, so I will keep that in the offset. And I will open that up. Okay, as soon as that opens up, we are going to file, a pen file, and I am going to pull in the text portion of this. So text, I like to keep it on smooth. Let's take that nice and big. Because it's doing line to line tracing, I like to keep it on smooth. And pop that over to line. I have it on black and white. Okay, and I have it at about 75% horizontal, and I can use 7 or 8 lines depending how deep I wanted, and I do believe I engraved this at 7 lines. My engraving speed was 1700 millimeters per second. Dynamic power, 5% minimum, 95% maximum, and we are ready to go. So in just a second, it will load up the lettering. So this way my engraving is going to do my dithering first, which I prefer for my images, and then it will go to line for my line art and text, which means I get sharper text. And I'm sharing my glasses with you because I still haven't found where I set down my other glasses. So you can see I've already done the dithering portion of the graphics. And now I'm going back in and it's doing line to line tracing of all the text and numbers. And this is it finished. So you'll see I have nice deep engravings, but they're nice and crisp and clear. And then I added some paint again with the acrylic craft paint, clear coated it with the diamond varathane water-based exterior. And that's how I completed that one. Now I just wanted to show you if you are not using the ruler to the side but to the front, that is when you will change your Y offset. And remember, before you're doing any sizable jobs, make sure you clean your laser, whether give it the fans a vacuum, a blowout, but we're going in and we're going to clean our laser lenses right now. Okay, so with my SCULPFUN S30 10-watt Pro, they do send you some extra nuts, extra lenses, extra gaskets, and a whole little toolkit in order for you to be able to do this. So they will send you some tweezers as well. Now I clean with Q-tips and just straight rubbing alcohol. So there's one of the gaskets I've already killed because these suckers are a little tricky. So that's why I wanted to take the opportunity to show you this part. So they'll give you a little tool to undo the screw, and then you will twist your air nozzle off. So this portion here, that actually contains the dust cover lens. So this protects the actual laser's lens from getting dirty. So there is another lens up inside, right there. So that's your main lens. And then the piece that I'm holding is the dust lens. So if you need to ever replace those, that is what you're looking for. So it is more common that we do replace the dust lens. Okay, and that's just held in place with a little black gasket. And you want to make sure that's free and clear of debris. There's no spots on it. Because if you don't clean it regularly, you could burn a spot. And then that's where that darn little green gasket goes into, is the air nozzle for the air assist. So we're going to set that aside, and you'll see, very crucial to make sure you're cleaning your air nozzles so that they're not building up with soot. So you're getting a nice clean engraving. You're not having anything impede the laser beam. So you'll just see the crap that I just got out of my nozzle, but I'm going to clean it further. So we're just going to set that aside. So I'm going to take a clean Q-tip, dab it into just plain old rubbing alcohol. Okay, so I'm going to wipe it gently with the alcohol, and then I'm going to use the clean tip and wipe that out. And I make sure to do that by the other side as well. And I realize I am totally blocking the shot from when I'm cleaning that lens. Sorry about that terrible shot. So now that both lenses are clean, I'm just going to screw and tighten that back on. Not super tight, but tight enough. And now it's time to clean your nozzle. So you just have to think that your laser beam needs to go through this pinpoint area. So it's not going to be very accurate or full power if it's blocked with soot in any way. So we're going to give that a good cleaning. And I've got it sped up. Woohoo! Look how fast I go. Now that is filthy. So it doesn't take much to build up. So good thing we do have that dust protection lens in that other portion for our laser. So once that's all clean, I'm going to put in my nemesis here, which is this little green gasket. Okay, sometimes tapping it will not seat it properly, so you might need to take your tweezers just to get that down nice and flat. Because I've actually had this sucker flip on me. Wondering what's going on with my laser. I'm not getting a laser beam, and it's actually this gasket has flipped over inside while I was putting the nozzle back on. So that's why you wish I had 3 or 4 hands to do this, because you need to make sure that you're keeping that nice and flat and twisting your air nozzle on. Sorry, terrible view, but it is difficult to do here. So I am just tightening this air nozzle just to finger tight, okay? Don't go over tight, because then you're going to squish out that little green gasket, and that will get in the way of your your laser beam. I can talk just fine today. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I just finger tight that, and then the little side screw that is in the nozzle, that is what I tighten to hold the nozzle in place. Okay, so I'm going to replace my air hose there, and now we're going to get the laser back onto the gantry, and a handy little trick so you don't accidentally drop your laser and your air nozzle hits the material is to put your focusing tool there while you're tightening up your screws. Okay, so that gives you the extra hand that you need while you're tightening these little screws up. Now, if you're not new to my channel, you've seen me do this a number of times, but if you're new, I'm going to stress that if you're doing longer jobs, just don't focus in one area, okay? I'm going to focus as far as that laser can go back to make sure my laser beam is going to be level the entire time. And if it's not level, well, you can wedge up your material. So I know I am a little low at the front, So I'm just taking a little card, the width of what I am off, and I'm just going to wedge that piece off so that my material and my laser will be level at all times for maximal engraving. And finally, in closing, I just wanted to share with you, I prefer clear pine, not knotty pine. Look how smooth you get opposed to the laminate pine. You get quite a few lines with it being glued together. And that's it for today. So I hope this video helps and inspires. Don't forget to subscribe. Now go create.